One of the hardest truths to accept is this: not everyone in your family truly loves you. I did not learn that from a sermon. I learned it sitting at a kitchen table that smelled like reheated rice, nodding along while something in me stayed tight the whole time. I ignored it for years, told myself it was nothing, kept showing up the same way. It cost me clarity. It cost me peace I did not know how to name back then. Family can look right on the outside. The words are there, the roles are in place. Nothing seems openly broken. But something underneath does not sit clean. You feel it, then you talk yourself out of it. You stay longer than you should. You excuse more than you should. Scripture does not pretend this cannot happen. Jesus said it plainly in Matthew chapter 10, verse 36. A man's enemies will be the members of his own household. That is not harsh for the sake of it. That is honest. He was not surprised by what people are capable of, even inside a family. This is not about turning against people. It is not about looking for fault. But there comes a point where you have to stop calling something healthy just because it is familiar. I remember driving home one night after a family gathering, hands still on the wheel long after the engine was off. Nothing had happened that you could point to. But I felt heavier leaving than I did arriving. That stayed with me. I did not have language for it then, but I could not shake it either. There are things God lets you feel before He explains them. And when relationships begin to shift, when distance starts to form, when something that used to feel stable no longer holds the same way, it is easy to assume something went wrong. I thought that too. I tried to hold things together longer than I should have. Tried to keep peace that was not really there. But there is another possibility most people do not consider. Sometimes God is not taking something from you. He is stepping in where you have been standing too long. Number 1. God sees what is hidden. And it took me a long time to accept this without arguing with it. God sees what is hidden. Not just the obvious things, the quiet ones, the ones people carry well. We tend to trust what is visible. A calm voice, a kind sentence, a familiar role. It is easy to rest there. It feels safer than asking harder questions. But Jesus said in Luke chapter 8, verse 17, "For nothing is hidden that will not be disclosed." That is not distant. That is now. Things come to light in ways that do not always announce themselves, but they become clear if you are willing to see. In families, what is hidden often stays hidden longer. There is history. There is loyalty. You do not want to believe something is off, so you smooth it over. You make sense of it. You give it another explanation. I have done that more times than I can count. I called certain behavior just their way. I told myself I was being patient. But patience and avoidance are not the same thing. I learned that late. There are patterns that do not shout. They repeat quietly. A comment that cuts just enough. A tone that shifts when no one else notices. A lack of support when it actually matters. Not once, but again and again. You start to feel it in your body before you can explain it. Something unsettled. Something not clean. God is not confused by any of it. He does not need time to figure it out. He sees what is driving it. He sees what sits underneath the words. We often excuse what God is already addressing. We delay what He is already revealing. Not every smile carries goodwill. That is a hard sentence, but it is true. And it does not make you cynical to admit it. It makes you honest. I remember replaying conversations in my head late at night, trying to understand why something small felt so heavy. It was not one moment. It was a pattern I had been ignoring. God does not act based on what looks right. He acts based on what is right. And when you begin to accept that, you stop arguing with what He is showing you. You start paying attention in a different way. Not suspicious, just awake. Number 2. When love is claimed but not practiced. I used to believe that if someone said they loved you, that settled it. I do not believe that anymore. Scripture is clear. In 1 John chapter 3, verse 18, it says, "Let us not love with words or speech, but with actions and in truth." That is simple. It leaves no room to hide behind language. Words are easy, especially in families. I care about you. I want what is best for you. Those things can be said without cost. Real love costs something. It shows up when it is inconvenient. It supports without keeping score. It does not quietly tear down what it claims to value. I began to notice the gap, not in one moment, but over time. Encouragement was missing when it mattered. There was always a small turn in the conversation that left me second-guessing myself. Nothing loud, nothing you could confront without looking unreasonable. But it stayed consistent. That is where clarity starts. Not in isolated moments, in patterns. Love does not undermine. It does not chip away at your confidence in small, repeated ways. It does not speak well in public and differently in private. When that happens, something is off, no matter how often the word love is used. God does not measure love by what is said, but by what is lived. That line settled something in me. It took away a lot of confusion. I stopped trying to reconcile words with actions that did not match. I stopped explaining things that did not need explaining. God is patient. He gives space for people to change. I have seen that. But he does not ignore what stays unchanged. When a pattern holds its shape over time, he does not pretend it is something else. You are not required to pretend either. There is a quiet kind of damage that happens when you keep accepting what contradicts truth. It wears you down slowly. You lose clarity. You start questioning yourself more than you should. I stayed in that longer than I want to admit. It cost me time. It cost me direction for a season. I was trying to hold together something that was not whole. When love is real, it leaves a trail you can follow. When it is not, that leaves a trail too. It just takes longer to admit it. Number 3. God's protection often looks like separation. This is where it became uncomfortable for me. I wanted God to fix things without changing anything. I wanted peace without distance. It does not work that way. Sometimes God removes people not to punish them, but to protect you. That is hard to accept when the people involved are close to you. You do not expect protection to look like loss. You expect it to look like restoration. But Scripture does not always frame it that way. In 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 14, it says, "Do not be yoked together with unbelievers." That is often reduced to belief alone. But I have seen it reach further than that. It speaks to alignment, the direction of a person's heart, their integrity, what they are willing to live by when no one is watching. You can be tied closely to someone and still be moving in different directions. That tension does not stay contained. It begins to affect how you think, how you decide, how you carry your faith. I ignored that longer than I should have. I thought closeness was always a good thing. I thought staying connected proved something. It did not. It only kept me in a place where I was constantly adjusting myself to maintain something that was not aligned. I remember sitting at a family table where the conversation seemed warm, yet every word left me uneasy. I went home that night more burdened than before I arrived. That kind of weight is not random. It comes from being in something that is not clean, even if it looks fine from the outside. Prolonged closeness with the wrong influence does quiet damage. It does not usually happen in one moment. It builds slowly. You start to compromise in small ways. You let things pass that should not pass. You stay silent where you once would have been clear. God sees that before you do, and he does not leave you there. Sometimes his protection comes as distance, not dramatic, not loud, just a steady shift. Fewer conversations, less access, a separation you did not plan. I resisted that at first, tried to bring things back to what they were. It did not hold, because God was not supporting it anymore. God's protection is not always gentle. Sometimes it comes as distance. He is not taking something good from you. He is cutting off what is quietly working against you. Number 4. God does not force hearts to change. I used to believe that if I kept showing up the right way, things would eventually turn. That if I stayed patient enough, consistent enough, it would bring change. That belief cost me. God does change hearts. I have seen that. But he does not force it. He does not override a person's will just to preserve a relationship. Romans chapter 1 verse 24 says, God gave them over to the desires of their hearts. That means there comes a point where God allows a person to walk fully in what they have chosen, even when it moves away from what is right. That was difficult for me to accept. I kept thinking I could help fix what was not mine to fix. I kept investing time, energy, conversations that went nowhere. It drained me more than I realized at the time. There was a season when I kept trying to repair something that God had already made clear. The more I pushed, the heavier it became. That heaviness is a signal, not something to ignore. It tells you that you are trying to hold together what God is allowing to separate. When someone resists truth consistently, when they reject correction or continue in the same pattern without change, God does not keep forcing alignment. He lets them walk their path. And when that happens, distance becomes natural, not always sudden, not always clear at first. But it forms. What looks like a sudden break is often the result of something that has been building for a long time. You just did not name it until it reached a point you could not ignore. I lost time there. Time I could have used differently. I carried weight that was not mine to carry. I stayed where God was already withdrawing his support. God will not sustain what a person refuses to make right. That line settled something in me. It removed the pressure to fix everything. It helped me step back without anger, without needing to explain everything. You can care about someone and still accept that they are not willing to walk in truth. You can love them and still recognize that you cannot stay tied to what is pulling you in the wrong direction. God is not asking you to abandon people. He is asking you not to replace his truth with your effort. Number 5. The role of discernment, not suspicion. I had to correct myself here. When you start seeing things more clearly, it is easy to swing too far the other way, to question everything, to pull back from everyone. That is not what God is doing. This is not permission to distrust people. It is a call to discern. Philippians chapter 1 verse 9 says, that your love may abound more and more in knowledge and depth of insight. Love stays. That part does not change. But it grows with understanding. It becomes steady, not blind. Discernment is quiet. It does not rush. It does not react to one moment and build a conclusion around it. It watches. It notices what repeats. It waits long enough to see what holds its shape. I used to react too quickly. A hard conversation and I would pull back. A good moment and I would lean in again. That back and forth kept me unsettled. I was responding to moments, not patterns. Patterns tell the truth. Discernment taught me to step back without shutting down, to stay present without giving full access. That is a different way of living. It is not cold. It is measured. Love remains. You can still speak kindly. You can still show respect. But boundaries begin to take form where they need to. Not as punishment, as protection. There are people I still care about, but they do not have the same access to my life anymore. Not because I am holding something against them. Because I finally accepted what was consistent. Pay attention to consistent fruit, not isolated moments. Anyone can say the right thing once. Anyone can act well for a season. But what stays the same over time, that is what you build your understanding on. Discernment clears confusion. It keeps you from being pulled back and forth by words that do not match actions. It allows you to love without losing your footing. That took time for me. I did not learn it quickly. But once it settled, things became simpler. Not easier, just clearer. Number 6. When God removes, he also repositions. When something leaves your life, it creates space. At first, that space feels like loss. It feels quiet in a way you are not used to. I remember one stretch where my phone stopped lighting up the way it used to. Fewer calls, fewer messages. It felt strange at first. I wondered if I had done something wrong, but God does not remove without purpose. Psalm 68 verse 6 says, God sets the lonely in families. That is not limited to where you were born. It speaks to where you are placed. When God creates distance, he is not leaving you empty. He is making room for something that fits differently, something that carries truth without tension. I once thought losing certain relationships meant I was alone. Then God placed people in my life who spoke truth without hidden motives. That shift was not loud. It did not come all at once. But I began to notice the difference. Conversations felt clean. There was no second meaning to sort through. No weight left behind after simple interactions. That is not small. That is what healthy connection looks like. God removes what harms, and he restores what strengthens. He is not reducing your life. He is refining it. Taking out what does not belong so what does belong has room to grow. It may not feel like gain at first, but in time you recognize it. You see what has been added. You feel the difference in your spirit. I would not have understood that earlier. I had to lose certain things to see it clearly. Conclusion. Let God be the one who decides. I had to come to terms with this slowly. Not everything needed my involvement. Not every relationship needed my effort to keep it in place. Some of what I was holding together, God was already loosening. This is not about labeling people. I tried that at one point. It only made things heavier. It is about trusting God's judgment more than your own need to make sense of everything. God sees fully, you do not. That alone should settle something. You are working with what you can observe. He is working with what is true all the way through. God acts justly. He is not reacting. He is not guessing. When he allows distance, when he lets something fall away, it is measured. It is not careless. And God protects faithfully, not always in ways you recognize at first, but always in ways that preserve what matters most. Proverbs chapter 3 verses 5 through 6 says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your paths straight." I had to lean on that when things did not make sense, when I could not explain why certain relationships were no longer what they were. You do not need to force relationships to remain. That pressure will wear you down. I carried it longer than I should have. It cost me time. It kept me tied to things that were not bringing life. If God is removing something, he is not leaving you without direction. He is guiding you forward, even if the path feels unfamiliar. There is a quiet relief that comes when you stop trying to manage what God is already handling. You stop chasing clarity in places where it is not going to come. You stop holding on out of habit. You let him decide. And when you do, things settle. Not perfectly, but honestly. Peace is not found in holding on to everyone. It is found in walking with God, even when he leads you away from what you once called family.